Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining me for this fireside chat with Rich Small. It's been a remarkable story for Neurotech. We can go to the next slide, please. Actually, I can go to the next. It's been a remarkable story, a 25-year journey for Neurotech from their start to the approval on Incelto back in March. So to start, I think some congratulations are in order. Rich, wow, you know, for all of the stops and starts that you've been through. Kudos to you. Jim Mazzo, Executive Chair since 2013. To Tom Aberg Jr., who couldn't be here due to family conflicts, kind of helped bring it clinically across the finish line, more than he expected when he took the job. And of course, to the entire Neurotech team, some of which have been here since the very beginning, even before the company was Neurotech. And the Lowy family, most of you don't know who they are, but you're going to learn about them today. Stephen Lowy on the left, Frank Lowy, the father, in the middle, and then Peter and David, the rock star of the family. Without them, I think it's fair to say we probably wouldn't be sitting here today. So we're gonna hear more about them. But Rich, you know, take us to the very beginning, the bottom timeline. And you'll see here, there's two timelines that converge in 2010, and we're going to get there. But can you just take us back to the very beginning? Where was the IP developed?
Sure. And first, thanks, John. Thanks to Craig. Thanks to Maureen for inviting me here to, I guess, force me to relive the story of Neurotech. A little painful at times, but we'll go through some of it. We're going to go through in 25 minutes, 25 years of history. So the technology actually developed out of the labs of Brown University, Patrick Aubuchar. And it actually was first licensed to a company called Cytotherapeutics back in the late 80s. And actually the first indications were CNS. And they spent about 10 years banging around with the technology, never really got it to work in a couple of the CNS indications. They closed down, and a company called Neurotech SA, a French company, working on some other technologies, actually acquired the technology for ocular disorders and actually created an operating company called Neurotech USA. So if folks who are familiar with us, if they see our emails of still Neurotech USA, I've been trying for years to try to figure out how to stop that, but I couldn't figure it out. But that's why we're Neurotech USA. So that's the origins of Neurotech.
And so then you started RP studies in 2004, GA studies in 2006. I understand there were some financial difficulties that were associated with that.
Right. So right at the time, so Neurotech SA was actually being funded by some European venture firms. And as I said, Neurotech SA, I don't even remember what they were working on, didn't work out. The RP and GA studies were the only assets left, but the European firms were just running out of money. So back in 2006, actually 3 U.S. venture firms came in to continue development of those RP and GA studies. And actually that time we reorged into a Delaware Corp company, and then actually a couple of years later, after I joined, I actually had to shut down the French parent company.
So let's talk about that. In 2007, you came on as a CFO. The RP and GA studies were ongoing, although they were going to ultimately fail in 2009. Tell us a little bit about how Rich Small, CPA, becomes CFO of a biotech company.
Yeah, well, the CPA to CFO is not that uncommon.
But of a biotech
company. Prior to that, I actually helped start an oncology company called Point Therapeutics, and took it from nothing to actually we publicly traded, got it into phase 3. Those studies, unfortunately, did not meet the clinical endpoints. and so faced that have shut down that company, but obviously learned an awful lot about the industry, running companies, and actually even before that, I actually was involved in the first IPO for a diagnostic company back in the late 80s. So my fondness for life science actually spun out of that, even though my background is more audit and working for Fortune 500 companies at the time.
Very good. So then you look at these timelines here. It's 2010. You're in your third year as CFO. Both the RP and GA studies have failed. The board decides to pivot to neovascular AMD. Once again, they're struggling for cash, and there's two kind of worlds that are coming together. Sometimes people think of worlds colliding. This, in fact, is the opposite, and it was kind of a symbiotic thing. You had Stephen Lowy, a guy halfway around the world, diagnosed with MacTel a few years earlier. It's worsening, and their family is desperate to find a solution for a disease that has no treatments even on the horizon. And then you've got Neurotech, which is once again struggling. The trials have failed. They're pivoting. They need money for the trial. Tell us about what happened.
Yeah, as you said, you can't make this up. And so just kind of the founding of it, just a couple of words for folks who aren't familiar with Frank Lowy. So Frank Lowy's the father, the patriarch of the family, just one amazing man. He's still fortunately with us. He was born in 1930 in Czechoslovakia, and obviously a time of great strife in Eastern Europe. He is a Holocaust survivor, and spent his first 15 or 16 years just surviving in those very difficult times. He lost his father at a concentration camp, but he figured out a way of how to navigate his way through to Eastern Europe. And actually, amazing enough, he found his way, and I still can't comprehend this, he actually landed up in Israel for a period of time from Eastern Europe and actually helped fight for the independence of Israel for a number of years. He was in the army, and so incredibly took part in that very historical event. And then I know members of his family actually emigrated to Australia. And then when he got through helping to form the state of Israel, he figured he would go down and join his family in Australia, where he had the idea of, he actually started a coffee shop, Delicatessens. But then for just saw back, and now I'm talking late 50s, early 60s, saw that there were something called shopping malls being developed in the United States, and had the idea, we can do that here in Australia, and actually created, and people might be familiar with it, with the Westfield shopping centers, and actually started to develop shopping malls. And all his sons were involved with the Westfield malls, and he led it all the way to 2018, where he actually sold the malls for, I still think it's a record for a shopping mall developer, for $33 billion. So just an amazing, just from where he started to that is just an incredible journey. And they actually, for folks who are really interested, there's actually a documentary they made on Frank's life, and it's titled What Will Become of Us? And it's very entertaining. And I just implore everybody to look it up, and it actually was shown at the Tribeca New York Film Festival back in 2019, and it's just amazing. So that's Frank. Stephen, in his late 30s, early 40s, gets diagnosed with something called macular telangiectasia. Nobody knows what it means. All he was told is there's no treatment, and his vision's going to deteriorate, and possibly he's going to lose his sight. That's a lot to tell somebody at a very young age. He went to Frank. Frank, of course, says, you know what? We're going to figure out a treatment for this. I have no idea how we're going to do it, but we'll figure it out. We have the means, we have the mind power. So what we're going to do is they formed a world-class group to actually start looking into developing treatments for macular telangiectasia in 2004. And let me point out a couple of very instrumental folks. The tall guy there on my right, second from the right, is Marty Freelander from Scripps. Right next to him is Alan Bird from Moorfields. And then right next to Frank is Emily Chu, who's from the National Eye Institute. And so they're the ones that actually, along with several other dozen, but they were the ones that really the core of developing this group back in 2004 to look for a treatment for macular telangiectasia.
You want to just talk briefly about LMRI, the Lowy Medical Research Institute?
And so they actually created, a couple of years later, the Lowy Medical Research Institute that now is actually, Marty actually is the president, and they probably have 20 or 25 researchers now. That actually mission is to develop treatments for macular telangiectasia.
And at the time, they started that institute just to learn as much as they could. Their idea was for this to be a globally collaborative organization, and their hope was that they would develop a treatment on their own.
That's correct. That's correct.
But then by 2016, the wet AMD study failed. The company was on the brink of shutting down again. Stephen Lowy is obviously, kind of a little bit despondent over the fact that the Institute hasn't come up with something. So tell us about this next transition period for Neurotech in 2016.
Okay. Before I take you there, let me just, so in 2010, which I forgot to add, so Marty, Allen, and Emily, they were given the marching orders from the Lowys. You've been spending 6 years doing research. What's happening? And it was basically what I would describe probably more of a research project than actually a project trying to develop a treatment at the time. So they were tasked with finding a treatment that actually could start in clinical studies ASAP. And they searched around the world, and Marty and Alan and Emily had some familiarity, first off, with CNTF and with ECT. And they're the ones that came up with the brainchild to say, you know what, we think through ECT, deliver CNTF over a long period of time, could actually be a treatment for macular telangiectasia. So they came knocking on our door with a proposition that they would make an equity investment in Neurotech, and that if we would help them develop a treatment for macular telangiectasia. We knew at the time, because of the RP and GA studies, it was safe, so we could start a study right away. To be fair about it, Neurotech, our management team, had no idea what macular telangiectasia was, but they were offering money, and as you said, we were struggling, so we actually entered into a formal collaboration in 2010. We get to 2016, the wet AMD study is not meeting our clinical endpoints. The venture firms don't have any additional money to invest into Neurotech. At the time, we were in the middle of a phase 2 for macular telangiectasia. Didn't know the studies. We were at 15 months away to getting to seeing what the study results were. The Lowy said, look, we're going to continue. We will finance this company 100%. We're going to reorg again. And at that time, they asked me to transition from CFO to CEO, along with Jim and the Lowys. And so that's how we kind of started the next phase. And just one little painful story with that is day one, as being the CEO of the company, I actually had to lay off half the company, and which was a very painful day. But even more importantly, I had to convince 15 other folks to continue to work at a company that had 3 clinical studies that didn't work. Not the easiest thing in the world to do.
Yeah, so 2 things. One, I just want to go back to 2010. One, I think, notable thing is that the Lowy family, the company was struggling financially invested $15 million just in Neurotech.
Right.
Do with it what you want to help them with the AMD trial. And then they said, correct me if I'm wrong, and we will completely fund development of MacTel in addition to that.
That's correct.
Right? So that's holy
correct.
cow.
Yeah.
But you're thinking, MacTel, we don't even know what it is. Good luck, right? And now you get to 2016. When they offer you the position of CEO, is that like, the Titanic just hit an iceberg, would you like to be captain? Or what did you think of that?
Well, to be truthful about it, I was so involved with helping to run the company along with Jim at the time. It was, to me, kind of a natural transition. It was something I was never looking to do, but it was a very natural transition. And I had enough understanding where I thought I could very strongly do that. And so I was willing to make the commitment that I will see this through to approval if they would properly finance. I will say one thing. Up until then, I forget how many closings I did for the first 9 years, but it was over 20. And it was tiring. And so the one thing I asked them was, if you properly finance the company, I will keep the company intact and lead it, and we will do everything we can to get this approved.
So now you're CEO, it's 2016, the company's failed 3 other indications, and now you've got MacTel. And so what did you learn from those prior studies that you changed when it came to this, and I'm talking about from a regulatory endpoint perspective?
So one of the things was, and I still think it's one of the key reasons that we succeeded, was that we never changed our clinical design when we got into a pivotal study. So we saw the phase 2 work. We basically did what you're supposed to do. You basically mirrored the phase 2 study as close as we could. I will tell you, we originally thought we were going to roll the study in 12 to 18 months. It took us 3 years to enroll it. We had something in between that called COVID, which kind of slowed us down a little. But
and that's high incentive to start loosening those inclusion criteria, right? You feel very pressured from a burn rate perspective.
Exactly, but we never deviated from that. The other key point to all of this was that at the time we were working with Terry Dagnon and Tom Homan, who folks might know. Unfortunately, Terry passed away last year. And they were working with the FDA, and they knew that preserving photoreceptor health was an endpoint that the FDA was very much interested in. And actually, because these are very slow progressing diseases, MacTel loses 1 letter a year. You can't do visual acuity as a clinical endpoint. So they were very instrumental in helping us actually gain approval of slowing down loss of photoreceptors as our key clinical endpoint.
And I would say the treatment is a huge contribution to science and to patients, but you getting it across an endpoint of ellipsoid zone disruption, the rate of loss, which is now being used widely, has to rank as one of the greatest contributions in addition to the product itself.
Yeah, it's a little, I'm a little stunned by it that little Neurotech created this pathway for it. But yeah, it is quite an accomplishment that, in hindsight, to think about that.
Yeah. So this is great. This is Stephen Lowy holding the FDA letter of approval with you and Jim Mazo in the background there. What goes through your mind when you see this?
This sums it up as far as just why we do what we do. How many times you get a chance, here's a patient of the disease that had no treatment, that actually through all of their hard work and just constant mission to get a treatment done, that we actually received an approval. And I can't imagine what Stephen was feeling at that time. I will tell you, when Jim and I actually told him, when we got approved, you could see there was a lot of emotion there, as you can imagine. And, this is why we do our job. So, it was an incredible honor to be part of that, as personally and for the company. But, to see something like that, it's just really heartwarming.
Yeah, I mean, they're an amazing family. They obviously got into it because he had a problem. They wanted to fix it, but they're really good, kind of great humanitarians, and it's a win not just for him. And I know they look at it this way, but for all of the patients out there. But I've got to come back to you. The guy that grew up on the streets of Boston, right? A numbers guy as you were growing up. What do you think about you? It's addressed to you and your career, and holy cow, a big chunk of your career has been with this company and all of the ups and downs. What goes through your head just seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, a few things. I mean, one is, and I know folks say it, and I know they believe it, and I'm sure it's true, of how great of working teams they work with. But I'll tell you, when you're asking folks to give up their professional career to actually get involved in a mission like this, when it doesn't look great, and people that will do it, is just something that every company needs. It's not so simple, and I will tell you, I even had days where I'm saying, what am I doing here? I have a family to feed, I have my own career I want to do, and so it does take a lot to do that. Not everybody's willing to do it. We lost people because at the end of the day, and I didn't begrudge them, they just wanted to go do other things. I will also tell you, I've heard it, other people have said to me, and totally true, you really need to, perseverance is obviously extremely important. But I will tell you, and also with a very healthy dose of stupidity through this. And I say that in a very loving way, because if somebody told me everything we had to go through to get this approved, no person in this room would do it. I'm telling you, it's overwhelming. But when you do it at bite-sized, step-to-step pieces and you don't think about it, it's very achievable. So that's one thing I will tell you, just from my standpoint, of just some way to attack problems. And we were really good at doing that. We just took bite-sized pieces to it, advanced it to the next stage, because as I said before, no person in this room would ever, if I told you from beginning to end what it would take, nobody would sign up for it. They'd say, I'm not doing that. So that's something I learned.
Well, congratulations to you. Congrats to your wife, Michelle, who stuck with you through this whole entire thing. Jim Mazzo kind of led this from the guy, time and again, comes into companies and gets them across the finish line. And to the entire Neurotech team and the Lowy family, congratulations. I think all of us were feeling your pain over all of these years, and everybody's almost as relieved as you that you got to the finish line, so congratulations.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's been an honor to be part of this. Thank you.